So, some really terrible news in the gaming industry. Vince Zampella, who is the mastermind behind some of the biggest hits in gaming like Call of Duty, Apex Legends, Titanfall, and Battlefield, has unfortunately passed away in a car crash. According to what we know, on Sunday, December 21st, he was driving at a high rate of speed in his Ferrari on the Angeles Crest Highway in the San Gabriel Mountains when he crashed into a guardrail. He was 55 years old, and there seems to have been a passenger as well that, as of this time, we don't have many details on. Now, this is a huge loss in the gaming industry, and it may seem obvious to some, but if you're younger, it's hard to really understand the experience and vision that Vince had. He was a part of the golden era of video games, and his resume reads like a greatest hits of gaming. So I wanted to not only cover the headline, but also just talk about the impact that he's had, as well as what it means for the gaming industry moving forward. Vince was actually one of the founders of Infinity Ward, which, in case you weren't aware, invented the Call of Duty franchise as a competitor to the Medal of Honor franchise, which some of you remember and others probably don't. Vince's first big game was as a creative director of 2015 Inc., who was contracted by EA to make Medal of Honor Allied Assault, which was basically an expansion of the Medal of Honor series. It's been argued as one of the games that pioneered the cinematic first-person shooter genre, and that we still find to this day in modern Call of Duty games. Think about what Call of Duty does well in its campaign, how cinematic it is. That kind of experience is basically built on what Vince pioneered in the early days with Medal of Honor Allied Assault. After that came 2007's Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Under his leadership at Infinity Ward, the industry shifted overnight from World War II to modern combat. The control scheme, the progression systems, the cinematic intensity, that was basically all Vince and his team. And I don't have to spend much time explaining just how big of an impact Call of Duty 4 had on the gaming industry. As an understatement, it revolutionized gaming and is basically responsible for why we see a lot of games made the way they are today. After working on and seeing the huge success of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, he had a spat with Activision, which resulted in them basically firing him and his Infinity Ward co-creator and not paying out their bonuses. Vince and Jason left, and they went on to found Respawn Entertainment. Respawn, of course, dropping certified bangers like Titanfall, Apex Legends, and the Star Wars Jedi series. The Star Wars series being massively important because it's a series that came at a time when EA basically said single-player games don't work anymore. To EA CEO Andrew Wilson's surprise, the first Star Wars Jedi game was massively successful and proved that people still wanted that high-quality single-player experience, especially in a Star Wars Jedi game. I mean, the name itself basically screams to the kind of experience that players actually want, a Jedi. And last, we're all familiar with the recent savior of the Battlefield series. How EA left us with the mess that was 2042 and basically tasked Vince with saving the franchise. It's kind of poetic and heartbreaking that he lived just long enough to see his final project launch and succeed, and Battlefield 6 basically expected to overtake Call of Duty, the franchise that he helped create. So let that be an example of just the kind of impact and vision that Vince had. Everything he touched turned to gold. He consistently delivered hit after hit no matter what he was working on. So it can't be understated how big of a loss this is for the gaming industry. Now, with the loss of Vince, what does this mean for the future of Battlefield, of EA, of the gaming industry as a whole? Well, for Battlefield, losing him creates a massive leadership vacuum at the top of EA's shooter division. The hope, I'm sure, is to pass on the reins to Battlefield GM Byron Bede, who worked closely with him, or possibly find somebody else who is in Vince's orbit to take over. For Respawn specifically, it's yet to be seen what will come out of there, as most of the IPs they've turned out all kind of spawned from Vince's tenure while he was there, so they've essentially just been trying to carry the torch he left them versus trying to spin something off themselves without his influence or input, at least as far as I'm aware. Now, if you're in the younger generation, specifically born basically any time after the year 2010 or later, I encourage you to go back and play games like the original Halo and the original Call of Duty 4, even Titanfall, and other games to get a sense of what games were like in this era. Before all the battle pass and monetization bullshit, games were focused on optimizing the gamer experience. And that's one of the things that Vince always pushed for. Regardless of who's leading teams that are working on games, both in competition with and inspired by Vince's work, it's important to point out that the success will depend upon the foundational principles that Vince stood by. Focus on the audience you're aiming for. Focus on what makes a great experience for them. Make something of high quality and the money and success will come. If there's one thing I think Vince could teach the people he led and those who look up to his work, I think he would agree that that's one of the defining qualities of his work. And it's something that you can apply to your own, no matter what field you're in. So take some time to reflect upon the legacy that Vince has left behind, what made it successful, and how you might be able to apply it to your own life. May you rest in peace. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to help out the channel, and keep an eye out for more. And don't forget to let me know in the comments which of Vince's games was your favorite and why. Peace.